Welcome to another episode of Pocketwatch Time. My name is Patrick W. We don't have the typical intro today because this is just kind of a bit of a discussion today. I got 2 emails and a comment and all in the same week about the same topic, and it just sort of motivated me that maybe this is something that I should talk about kind of again. I've talked about it once where I just had a general concept of some pretty nice pocket watches out there, but I didn't really put it down into the price point and maybe the why one over the other that I want to do in this episode. The short story is I got an email and a comment saying that they wanted to find watches for either loved ones or themselves, but they wanted them reliable and they wanted them reasonably priced. In the world of pocket watches, reliability and good price, well, those are hard things to come by, particularly if you're going into the vintage world. And that's why this video is going to touch on that a little bit, but mostly on a completely different subject. So for the vintage world, it's easy. There's only one recommendation I have for you, and it's going to eBay and looking for 2 different types of searches. The first one, type in pocket watch and serviced. What that means is someone out there has done probably a rudimentary servicing to this watch, but they've at least taken it apart, they've at least oiled it, they've at least made sure that it doesn't have 100 years of grime and gook in the gears, and it runs reasonably well. The reason I say maybe their servicing isn't the greatest is if you were to buy a regular vintage pocket watch and you were to send it off to a company or take it to a jeweler or something to have it actually serviced, the service itself would probably cost $200 to $300. The watches that I'm showing here in this eBay search, some of the ones that I would recommend to others would be around $300 to $500. So you're virtually getting a free service for a watch that you probably wouldn't have paid for a service for if you bought the watch by itself. What I mean by that is these watches are really nice, but they're not worth probably more than the service price. Are you really going to buy a $200 watch and spend $300 to get it serviced? It just doesn't make sense. So if you can buy a pretty cool looking watch for $300, pretty darn sure it's going to last you for a while because it's been serviced. Or, even if you get a nicer one for $500, I think this is a pretty great way to get your hands on a vintage watch. Something with a bit more of an American railroad provenance or whatever you're looking for that might scratch that pocket watch itch. I think that that's the greatest. Type in serviced pocket watch into eBay, see what comes up. The next example for a vintage watch isn't as straightforward as the first example. For this one, we're going to type in pocket watch and salesman or salesman's case. And what you're going to see are real pocket watches that have been put into mostly more modern cases. And the cool thing about this is you can still get a vintage watch. Usually they'll guarantee them that they're working pretty well. They may not be serviced, but they're at least working well. And they put them in a stainless steel case. It might be gold tone, it might be silver tone, and it usually has an exhibition front and back so that you can actually see the movement. And for, a person new to pocket watches, don't you kind of want to see what makes it work? I think this is an avenue of collecting or an avenue of owning a watch that would be really interesting to someone who just wanted to carry a watch every day or every other day or more often than normally would, because it becomes a conversation piece. Not only is it just a cool watch, but it looks cool. And I think that's a pretty cool example of a way to get a pocket watch. So those are my 2 vintage examples. So this next line, well, I don't really support it that much, but I'm going to tell you about it anyway. And what I mean about that is there's about 3 or 4 brands that I'm going to throw out right now, and they're all kind of what I call gimmicky pocket watches. And that doesn't mean they're bad. It just means they're not real. And, to me, a pocket watch, the vintage aspect, or at least the old-fashioned aspect, that's what makes it a pocket watch. And these are sort of the equivalent of buying a really new, relatively inexpensive, let's just call them cheap wristwatch, but it's in pocket watch form. And these companies, usually they'll have a mechanical movement. I'm sure it's not a bad movement, but it's probably not the greatest movement. They're usually skeletonized because I think they think people who don't know anything about watches love skeletonized movements. You don't usually find skeletonized pocket watch movements. So once again, it's kind of a gimmick. But this line generally has some pretty decent looking watches in the almost $200 to $300, $400 range. And for that reason, I mean, I can't really knock them. The price is nice. They look relatively nice. I have no idea if the quality of these watches are actually good. I've never held any of these watches in the hand. But just looking at them, I mean, as I said, I'm not mad at them. It's a good alternative for someone who really wants to own a pocket watch, wants something a little bit more modern, a little bit more reliable, probably a better time, instrument than something that's 100 years old. So let's take a peek at a couple. The first brand that I'm going to show you is Stuhrling. And pet peeve number one, it's an odd spelling of Stuhrling. I mean, I hope it's somebody's last name so it makes sense. I hope it's not just a name they decided to make different looking so it was cool. We'll probably never know. The cool and bad thing about this site is I actually saw some really cool watches on their website. The problem is all the cool ones are sold out. So they sell some, just what I was talking about, pocket watches that are all skeletonized, and they don't look like pocket watches, or at least not real pocket watches. Their prices aren't bad. The movements are probably pretty good, very reliable. So I can't say I love these watches, but if you like the look of them and you're looking for that kind of wearing pocket watch, it's probably a pretty decent alternative. The next brand that I'm highlighting, it's Dalvey. And similarly, until I started just looking for inexpensive pocket watches, I had never heard of this brand. But I will give them a little bit of credit. Their watches are actually pretty nice looking. And the main thing that makes them nice looking for me is the dial. They have something modern yet kind of vintage. And what do I mean by that? Their dials look very vintage. They've got some guilloche. They look like standard traditional vintage dials, but they've got really fun colors. So, they've got some really, I wouldn't say they're neon, but they've got some bright colors. They've just got some different colors that you would never find on a traditional pocket watch. And I think they package it really well. I think it's a pretty nice looking watch. They're around $300. I don't know if that's good or bad, but for what you're getting, you're going to get a reliable, nice pocket watch that you could probably carry. And, I don't think it's a bad watch. I'm going to both recommend and not recommend the next watch. It's by the Mondaine watch company. And I guess this brand has some significance or history somewhere where I guess this iconic look is known. I don't know it, but I guess out there in the world of watches, this is iconic. It's a cool looking watch. I really like the dial. I really like the handset. I just think it's really nice looking. I don't know if I picked up a really bad example, but I went to a store one day and I saw one of these and I was pretty excited because, I know it's not the greatest watch in the world, but it's nice looking. And kind of like the people who reached out to me, maybe you just want you can carry it and not worry about it so much kind of pocket watch, and this fits that bill. I tried it, and when I held it, it was the thinnest metaled, cheapest feeling, lightweight watch I think I've ever felt in my life. I don't know what to tell you. It just felt very cheap. And, it's not that cheap. On their website, it's about $300. I think I've seen some on eBay or on other sites for maybe about half that. So, you can pick it up for a decently good bargain. And maybe for that price, it's not too bad, but I would not spend $300 for it. And if you've waited this long, you're going to finally get my real recommendations. As I said, the Stuhrling watches and watches like that, they're a little generic. The Mondaine watch, if that's the quality of all of their watches, no thank you. The Dalvey watch, I mean, it's not bad. It's my middle of the road recommendation. But for the last three brands or the last three types of pocket watches, I kind of think this is where I would go. If you're looking for that watch between, $300 or maybe even a little less to $500, I think this is where you're going to get the best bang for the buck. The first one of my picks, it's the Gotham Watch Company. And one, they just got me with the name Gotham. I mean, who doesn't love Batman and Gotham City and the reference? I don't know what their reference is, but they hooked me with the name. What I really like about their watches is they actually look like vintage watches. I don't know their history. I don't care enough to research it and look into it. But the idea is when you look at this watch, it looks like a vintage timepiece. And they did it really well. So for the $200-ish price point of this watch, you get a watch that really looks vintage. It just has that presence. It looks cool. And for me, who likes vintage pocket watches, I don't necessarily want a completely modern looking watch in my pocket. I would like something that looks or at least pays a little bit of tribute to the vintage. And I think the Gotham watches, as I said, I haven't held one in hand, so I can't tell you if they're cheap feeling like the Mondaines or if they're just decently built. But for the price, it's a pretty nice looking watch. And even though I recommend this watch, because it's probably the nicest watch of all of the watches in this category, I don't 100% love it. And this is the Bulova. They make this watch in a silver color and a gold color. And kind of like I talked about earlier, they're stealing the whole skeletonized look. Not my favorite thing when it comes to pocket watches. They just didn't do that. So they're obviously trying to make this a more modern watch. The advantage is, I think it's actually a pretty nice watch. The movement looks substantial. The build looks substantial. The price tag is a little bit more substantial. This one comes in at almost $500, at least on their website. I don't know, maybe Amazon or some other website sells it for cheaper, but it's the most expensive watch of all the watches we're looking at. But I think if you put this in your pocket, it's going to keep very good time, and I think, it's probably built like a tank. It's a good looking watch. Not my favorite, we'll get to that one next, but I think you wouldn't be disappointed with it. And the last brand, it's Tissot. And yes, Tissot makes more than just the PRX. They actually still make some pocket watches, and some of them are pretty nice. Now, granted, they do make quartz and they do make mechanical pocket watches. Their mechanical pocket watches, at least on their website, are pretty darn expensive. I'm pretty darn sure you can find those on, I don't know if it'd be a Joma shop or an Amazon.com, but you could probably find those for cheaper. But the watches that I'm going to at least pay attention today, just to keep them in that price point, is some of their quartz watches. And here's the good and bad. If you really want to carry a pocket watch every day or more often than not, and you want it to be reliable and you want it to keep excellent time, there is nothing wrong with a quartz pocket watch. And I know I sound like a complete idiot and a hypocrite. In one sentence, I'm saying how much I love the vintage, but now I'm talking about having a non-mechanical pocket watch. I know, I don't make any sense. But the idea is you truly can set it and forget it, and you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to wind it. You don't have to worry about, bumping it too hard. It's going to be rugged. The disadvantage, obviously, it isn't mechanical. It doesn't have the heartbeat. It doesn't have, if you want, the winding action. So you do lose out a little bit of that. But if you really just wanted a watch for carrying, I think Tissot's not a bad option, and I think they've got a couple nice watches in this category. So thanks for stopping by. We were just talking about some pocket watches you can pick up from normal websites and stuff like that, and hopefully you can find a good gift, or you could find something that is more of an everyday wear kind of watch, or just something to satisfy that pocket watch itch. I'm not going to say that these are my favorites. I think if you learn a little, do a little bit of homework, you can find some really cool things. I haven't made a video about this one yet, but this is an example. I mean, this is a Girard Perregaux sterling silver. It's a exhibition case, Swiss movement. This cost when it was new almost $1,500. I found it on a website for less than $400. And I mean, I think it's everything that I would want in a wear it all the time pocket watch. It's got a modern ETA movement, which means it's reliable and accurate. It's got a cool brand. I mean, who doesn't love a Girard-Perregaux? And, you know, it even has a precious metal case for a really reasonable price. But if you didn't know the watch existed, if you didn't know to look for the watch, you know, how are you going to find it? And that's what I say. This is a hobby that takes time. And if you've got the time, do a little research, look around, find a watch, make a search history for it, find it, and maybe you'll win it for a great price. But if you don't have that kind of time, you don't have that kind of patience, and you're looking for something, you know, I would really say eBay, looking for the serviced watches, looking for the watches that have been put into the salesman cases, those are really great places to start. If you're looking for something a little bit more modern than some of the other ones that I recommended today. So thanks for stopping by. Thanks for listening. I hope this helped. If it did, please leave a comment. Tell me which watch you like, and think about joining the channel. I appreciate it. I'll catch you real soon in a new video. Take care.
If you enjoyed this content, I'd really appreciate it if you'd subscribe to the channel. Please leave a like, or maybe even a comment or a question. The YouTube algorithm loves it when you do that, and it helps the channel. And speaking of helping the channel, I've got 2 avenues where you can donate to the channel. You can join right here on YouTube by becoming a YouTube member, or you can follow the link in the description and join my Patreon. Thank you, I really do appreciate it.